I am Gita Balakrishnan. I'm an architect. Today I run an organization called Ethos, which is working in the space of outside the classroom learning. We try and engage students, young minds, young architects, even architects today, where they continue their process of learning outside the classrooms. The objective is that while colleges do what they have to through their academic schedules, we are trying to bring to them different opportunities of learning, be it through competitions, be it through workshops, be it through finding themselves as well in these processes, finding themselves in the sense they realize how where they stand vis-a-vis the rest of the student fraternity or the architect fraternity. We also launched something called ASEDGE 2 years ago, which is in the space of online learning. So yes, primarily that's basically what I do. I graduated from the School of Planning and Architecture, Delhi, in way before many of you were born, in 1990, and it's been a beautiful journey since then. Yes, discovering every day. So, well, architecture was not necessarily on the top of my list. I was very good at the sciences, so it could have been anything that really I could have ended up in. I have he just passed away a few months ago, an uncle who was a civil engineer. He used to work with the Center for Rural Development in IIT Gujarat. And that's something that kind of got me curious about the field of architecture. And we were living in Delhi. And while I enrolled at St. Stephen's for physics honors, because we were awaiting the results at SPA Delhi. Once I got through, of course, there was no looking back. Even though I got admission in an AIMS later, I chose not to really take any of that and went ahead with architecture because I started loving what I was doing. In the field of whether I was sure once I got into college, no, I mean, it was I was lost for quite a bit, and like most of us are, I guess, even the best of us who know they want to be an architect kind of are lost. But I had, besides this uncle who lived in Chennai, I had really no exposure that much to architecture. So it was learning about it on your own, really. And we had some fantastic teachers, and I think we made that happen. I mean, the way I have evolved in the sense of being comfortable with the technology as we see it today is probably because of the way my life progressed. But when we were back in college, of course, there was nothing like technology. So we did spend a lot of time with each other, with paper, with pen. There's so internet researches and things like that were never an order of the day. Of course, I'm not saying one is better or one is worse, but we actually had to, when we went case studies, it meant actually visiting that place and getting information rather than finding out a lot more about it even before we went there. So there was that element of surprise in everything that one did, because one didn't know anything about it until you really saw something out there. It holds true not only for the studies and things like that, but also for the process of design, because it was really a clean slate every time over. So whether it is you're talking about design, you're talking about construction. I remember, I to this day remember, trying to figure out how a false ceiling was hung from that chapel, and it's something that it never, those drawings never really made sense until you actually saw it on site. Oh, this is what we were trying to draw. While today, I think you get enough of photographs, enough of 3D modeling and things like that for you to understand these things a lot more easily. Those were very different times. I was a day scholar, so it was usually the hostlers, at least in those days, who were really active in NASA. So while my sheets traveled to NASA, I did not really actively participate in any NASA. My third year working drawings went and they never came back. That's the only set of sheets that I don't have with me as records. I still have all my sheets from my college days, but I don't have those with me. But yes, that. But after that, I think pretty much from 2007, I've kind of been there. 2007 was the NASA where transference happened in Bhopal. After which, pretty much every NASA I have been associated with, either present at every NASA or at a zone NASA, and it's really grown. I mean, I've heard stories in those days, though, like I said, I didn't myself attend. I've heard stories from my colleagues, from my seniors who went, saying, and we would think 500, 800,000 was a huge number, and today we are talking about a completely different scale altogether. I think the way you guys are professionally, I mean, some editions of it are kind of all over the place, but the approach, I think, is great, and I think each of you is getting complete training on actually life when you guys are taking part in managing these events. For instance, last year, to host an event where there was no host college at a location like that and be able to, I mean, there would have been a lot of issues. I'm not saying no. There would have been brickbats that you would have got. I don't know, you're probably still settling accounts from them, God knows. But I think it still is such an immense and huge training. So I think you kind of get set for life by, of course, being part of the organizing team, but even participating and seeing what's happening there is good. I know you're receiving a lot of flack as well. There are colleges which say, okay, there's not much happening and it's a big party and stuff like that. But why not? It's okay to even do that. And I sometimes seriously think that you might want to revisit and see how actually let those 3 days be for celebrating and enjoying, and keep away a bit of the seriousness and say that that's done in the Nasas, that's done in the juries, and let these 2-3 days be about actually having fun together in that. It's just a point of view. Get there, how did that happen is another story altogether, because Professor Chishti was my studio director in the third year, and he retired a couple of years ago from SPA. Every time I visited his class, he would make me narrate to the rest of the class on how so from the third, our training was in the final year last semester. From the third year, my brother was in Pittsburgh, and he managed to get me the email address, the snail mail address of this prof. And I would write love letters to him every week saying, please let me come for training. Please let me. And he would write back saying, there is no such thing. We do not have something called trainees. It's only for the master's program. So it went on for a year and a half, close to a year. And finally, when I was in my fourth year, first semester, he said, this girl is really persistent. Just let her come. And that's how he kind of got me on board and said, come over. And that was one of the battles that I won, parents not wanting me to go final year of college, want you to settle down and things like that. But it was something that I had to do for myself. And yes, I was very clear I wanted to come back. That's another thing. In fact, the prof offered me a master's program there and said, why don't you stay on? And I said, my journey ahead of me is very India-centric. So maybe and it may not necessarily be architecture-centric, because I was trying to form things for myself on what I wanted to do. So I said, if I want to, let me look at it at a later date, but I was very clear I'd come back. So I think it opened up a lot of the horizon for me, in a sense of it gets you to, you were working with a team which had Lebanese, which had Korean, which had a Taiwanese, which had Indians, which had an Egyptian, which had a Greek person. And you get to see that there is so much else. And those were days when, of course, one didn't know enough about these places also, right? Because you were not exposed so much. And so it was a great learning for sure for me. And I think the confidence of being able to make presentations, until then, if you ask my colleagues in class, they probably would say that maybe I wasn't as outspoken or as confident as I am. Of course, today is a different story, but as I would have been maybe a couple of years after that trip. So it certainly did change me as a person, for sure. I mean, besides, of course, working on that project where the Center for Building Performance and Diagnostics, today we talk of air quality, we talk about, uh, and we're talking this. I'm talking 1990, where we were designing a building, a space for the architecture department, which would monitor all these things, diagnose all these things, allow the building to actually move, in the sense the sensors would allow the windows to get tinted and less tinted based on the amount of light that's required, allow windows to open and close as and when the air ventilation is required. And I'm so gratified today. I went back because my son finished his undergrad from the same college, but he's doing material sciences and he's now pursuing his PhD. Went back to see that building actually built 4 years ago, and it was really a surreal feeling, because I have models of it made with wood, and you see that actually up there. It feels really nice. Personally, I didn't necessarily face any real major issues being a woman, but I think I would be speaking from a place of privilege, because again, I don't think it's good to generalize and say people do not have a problem being a woman in our profession. I think they do. It's just that I haven't faced it because of probably the kind of person I am. Also would go out there and make sure that what I want happens, irrespective. But not everybody has the ability to do that. One, as an innate personality trait. Not everybody has the backing, whether it is family backing, whether it is backing from a college, whether it is backing from a peer group. Not everybody has that. So I would be speaking from a position of privilege. I know there are a lot of people who say that it doesn't matter, I'm an architect. I'd like to say that too, but I wish it were true. There is definitely there are baggages that a woman architect comes with, which is true of every field. It's not specific to our field, which is true of every field. And it's something that is a struggle that one is working to deal. Not just getting license from COA, even though from amongst those who have got license from COA, look at how many women-led firms are there. And how many women-led firms are there where they don't have a spouse or a partner or a parent or a brother who's an architect? How many are there who are actually women-led firms? Chitra Vishwanath could be. You can name them actually. There are a few of them that you can count. So why does that happen? Again, it's an interesting thing. We at Ethos have been thinking of this, discussing this. I don't know if you're even aware, we are an all-women organization right now. Not necessarily intentionally driven in that direction, but gravitated in that direction, because we are also a virtual office. We are looking for people who are taking breaks, because we feel they need that. Little support at that period in life, so that if they want to jump back into active practice once that necessity for a break is out of their way, they'll be able to do that. Again, our profession needs people to be upfront, at the side, working. I think many of them are discovering today that work at home is a very difficult option in architecture. While it's not impossible, it's a more difficult option than other professions. So women need to take breaks because of their biological trait or whatever. They need to take breaks. And getting back into action after that break is something that our profession doesn't lend itself easily to. And I wish it did. I wish there are firms that allow that to happen, but not everybody does. Because after that, there are the caregiving years for the child. There are maybe the second child. By then, your male counterpart has probably gone ahead by a few years. So if we could use those years in between, so we are trying to do workshops in which how we can get these people, get these women taking breaks to actually strengthen themselves in that period, empower themselves in that period, probably undergo further training, so they're one step ahead on certain things when they get back into. I think that will help. So it's the reality of our lives, and it is something that women would do well to recognize, and men, of course, men also should recognize that, but women would do well to recognize and prepare for, and say that, yes, this is likely to happen, and let me start thinking about what I'm going to do in that period well before. And I think we might be in a better place. I do see things changing, for sure.